Joining us on the program now, as we are in a very active time in our politics here in Michigan and across the U.S., is Dave Dulio, professor of political science at Oakland University, where he also serves as the director for their Center for Civic Engagement. Dave, thanks for being with us.
Hey, Tyler, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you on as we get some big news this week in the Michigan Republican Party, a potential change maybe coming to their primary as we head into 2024 and get ready for a big presidential election season, especially as it seems it's going to be in the Republican Party. Considerations being taken by the Michigan GOP to change from participating in Michigan's open primary, which allows cross-party voting on either the Republican side or the Democratic side of the ballot, to more of an Iowa-style caucus, or potentially just up to about 5,000 precinct delegates from each of Michigan's 83 counties. What really is the basis behind this potential change or this consideration from the Michigan GOP?
Yeah, I think there's one thing that's driving this, and that is the scheduled primary based on the action that the state legislature has taken is outside of the window permitted by National Republican Party rules. The RNC set the rules for this primary process last year, and then the Michigan legislature comes in and sets a primary date of, I believe it's February 27th.
Yes.
And that is that would violate the GOP rules. So the Michigan Republican Party is kind of stuck, right? They can stick with the primary date that's been set, but be in violation of national party rules. And with that would come some sort of penalty, likely loss of delegates to the national convention, which is the point in the process where the presidential candidate is formally nominated by the party. It might also have some financial repercussions. But this wouldn't be unprecedented. In 2008, both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party violated each of their own national party rules during the primary process by holding an early primary. The Democrats this time around have made a carve out for Michigan in the first wave of primaries that are going to take place, and Michigan is fine with the date of February 27th in terms of Democratic primary rules. Now, if they don't want to violate the rules, they have to do something else. So those two options are caucus or convention, and each of those has different pluses and minuses, pros and cons. You mentioned Iowa, certainly the most famous caucus state, but I would be shocked if the Michigan Republican Party did anything that looked like a traditional Iowa caucus. I imagine if Republicans have a caucus, it will be much simpler than what the Iowa caucuses used to look like. I'm not even sure that the Iowan folks have figured out what their caucuses are going to look like in 2024 yet.
Yeah, 2020 was not exactly the smoothest caucus for Iowa. Quite disastrous
in many ways.
Yes, to speak on it lightly. So I'd be certain that the Michigan Republican Party, especially if they're going to be on the earlier side of things, are going to want to be a little bit outside of the realm of what Iowa did. That being said, Dave, along with this, part of the issue is the uncertainty surrounding when Michigan's date is going to be. In order for that legislation that passed that would move Michigan's primary to being February 27th, the House and Senate have to adjourn by the end of November, which would be several weeks early. That being said, there is a majority in both the House and the Senate on the Democratic side that could, so to speak, poison pill the Republicans into that situation anyway. So how much of a factor is that playing in, knowing that the Democrats also have a little bit of their own strategy behind potentially this date that could impact the National Republican Convention?
Yeah, so the story behind that, Tyler, right, is any law that's passed during a legislative session in Michigan doesn't go into effect until 90 days after the legislature adjourns for the year. So if Michigan were to, if the legislature were to adjourn at its normal time in mid-December, that law about the primary date would not go into effect until March, right? And which would be outside of the window, or sorry, it would not go into effect until it was too late, right? And now there's a way around that with something called immediate effect. If the legislature votes, I believe it's a 2/3 vote in both chambers to provide immediate effect for legislation, then it takes effect right away. Obviously, immediate effect, right? So, but Democrats couldn't get those votes. No Republicans voted for immediate effect, and you can see why, right? They don't want to be on the side of voting to basically violate their own party rules. So, there is some uncertainty. I think that it depends on sort of the state of the Democratic primary toward the end of the year, right? I mean, if it's Joe Biden and really nobody else, well, there's no real pressure to have a primary in the early window, right? I think that Michigan Democrats would want to maintain that spot though, and have something so that they can be set up for future primary cycles where it would be more of a contest. Now, having said that, right, Marianne Williamson and Robert Kennedy have said that they are going to challenge Joe Biden. Those are going to be long shot candidacies at best. But I would imagine that you'll see the legislature adjourn in that mid-November timeframe so that you can have that February 27th primary.
Yeah, that does not require a supermajority in either chamber of the legislature in order to happen. So, that's something you can presume would happen, being that the Democrats were very much adamant about moving up Michigan's timeline,
Absolutely.
knowing
Yep.
that this is a critical swing state that could have a major impact even in the primary season for setting up the presidential general election as well. Joining us on the Megacast today is Dave Dulio, a professor of political science at Oakland University, where he is also the director of their Center for Civic Engagement. More information on oakland.edu/CCE. Dave, last week, Thursday, just a little over a week ago, Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, presumably could be a Republican candidate for president in 2024, visited Midland in a almost 1 hour speech where he talked about a number of different issues, including combating wokeness, so to speak, in the state of Michigan, as he's allegedly done also in Florida. This is not something new to Ron DeSantis. He has gone to other states already, as he's kind of, as you said, has the worst kept secret in American politics that he's running for president. So with all that being said, with him going on this not presidential primary tour and making all these different speeches all across the union that sound very much like a presidential candidate, why hasn't he declared?
I think they're playing the long game. I think that they have a strategy mapped out, he and his team, and they are going to stick to that plan. And I think that that's really smart. They have, I'm sure, identified a particular point in time where they think it is most beneficial for them to make an announcement and take it from there. So I think that they are biding their time, and I think that what they're showing is discipline, right? I mean, I think that there have been a couple points in time, for example, last week with the Trump indictment, where DeSantis could come out and say, okay, this is enough. I've had enough. This is, we need to move in a new direction, et cetera, et cetera. But they haven't done that, and I think that just tells me that they've got it planned out and they're sticking to that plan in a very disciplined way.
And part of that, of course, has to factor into Florida's so-called resign to run law, which does state that you have to resign from your position within that state government. So, for example, the governor would have to resign in order to run for a federal position while presumably still holding the office, which is not the case necessarily in all 50 states, including in Michigan. So that's got to play a factor too, but that timing also has to be really well timed out too, given that Donald Trump is the presumptive candidate in the GOP. There's going to be that presumably epic battle between the old guard, in this case being Trump, and the new guy that's very Trump-esque in Ron DeSantis. So how does that timeline factor in too, would you imagine?
Yeah, I think the fact that he'd have to resign is a big one, right? I mean, I think he's got time. They can do things behind the scenes as a campaign that don't require an official announcement. But at some point, they're going to have to pull the ripcord and do it, right? But I think that part of it might be that he's got some legislative activity he wants to pursue in Florida and be able to again, when he goes to places like Michigan, tout continued successes in what he sees as a changing Florida as a way to improve that state and point at examples of hey, we did this in Florida, we'll do this at the federal level. So I think that that's likely part of it as well.
Yeah, and it's also a way for him to continue to make some progress on the Republican side in Florida and use that as also an example when he's making these speeches all across the union, similar to what Trump has done in his own way, both in 2016 throughout his presidential run up until 2020, and even in the last election. Building that narrative is a critical part, especially if you're going to go up against a guy like Donald Trump. And so,
yeah,
please.
There's one drawback to that, Tyler, and I think that is that DeSantis needs this to be, at the end of the day, a Trump versus DeSantis matchup, right? I mean, I think that you've seen from the polling that's out there now that the non-Trump side of the Republican Party is splintered between DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott's senator from South Carolina is gonna form an exploratory committee today, and undecided, right? He needs to consolidate the non-Trump side of the party to try to win this thing. And the longer it goes where he's sort of, flirting with it, I think that gives those other rivals more power to consolidate it themselves. So, I mean, at some point they're going to have to take the step and throw his hat in the proverbial ring.
Yeah, more time that Trump has other people to focus on, and the run also gives him more time to burn some of those bridges, which opens up the door for Ron DeSantis. It's all a bunch of strategy going on, as you expect as you're going for a presidential run, especially in a year like 2024, where regardless of if it's Republican versus Republican or Republican versus Democrat, it's going to be a very, very interesting and very competitive presidential election run. Dave, anything else for us this week before we let you go?
Nope, just, may you live in interesting times. That ancient Chinese curse is certainly upon us.
We always appreciate having you on and look forward to our next discussion as more goes on over the next week and beyond here in Michigan and across the U.S. Thank you as always.
Thanks for having me.